Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, brought to you by Krone. Today on the podcast, we're joined again by Mr. Jeffrey Alfalfa Jackson. So on my new seating, you've heard most of the story, but the last part of the story is we did cut it tall too. We left about 4 inches of stubble as we were cutting that alfalfa. That did leave some leaves, made nice clean hay. That was really the reason that we were wanting to. I have a rotary swather, so trying to get clean hay and new seeding on loose ground, rough road to hoe.
help reduce the vacuum effect.
That's exactly why we did it. Over on the stuff that's a year old, no big deal. We had to get over top of the gopher mounds, but we just set our height on the established stand right above the top of the gopher mounds, and that's usually 4 inches tall. And go. On the new seating, we did pick it up just a little bit more. We were probably 4 or 5 inches off the ground. Does that aid what I'm doing? Like, that doesn't. Does the taller cut height matter on alfalfa the way that it does on grasses?
Well, from an energy standpoint, it technically doesn't make that much difference because all that energy technically is stored in that crown, in the root underground. In your growing points, you have all those axillary buds right at the soil surface. So you're going to probably gain just a little bit of extra trifoliate activity quicker because you've got some of those little petioles that are already there with a bud on them above ground. So cutting it higher definitely makes it look like it greens up and grows faster.
That was kind of my assessment. Yeah.
But also, you don't stress that plant out by scalping it clear to the ground. You left, I'm going to call it just a little bit of shade there. You're probably going to have it canopy those rows just a touch quicker and, keep weeds out, keep moisture there. So I think there's probably a neat little benefit to it. Plus, like you mentioned, the more ash that you can leave in the field versus in a bale is always a good thing. And it helps your quality sample and customers are happy. And when you've got that windrow laying on top of 4 inches versus on the ground, it dries faster. You get air movement under it. And
well, it was 100 degrees and 15% humidity. So getting stuff dry was not the tough part. No.
So that first swath was dry by the time you got done with the rest of the field.
Pretty much. We had some of that second, the true second cutting from last year's establishment. We cut it Thursday and baled it Sunday morning.
Oh, that just makes me happy for you.
Oh, did you see the picture that I posted about accidentally doing hay right? Of course, yes. I put the bale next to some straw to make it look extra good, but man, we didn't have any dew either, so we weren't getting that bleaching that the dew causes. What we were getting was 75% humidity at about 4 o'clock in the morning. And you let that set for a half an hour, and then we went and baled, and every leaf stayed in the bale. And you cut that bale open, and you grab the flake, and you shake, and no leaves come out.
That's beautiful. I'm telling you.
It's the best hay I've ever put up in my entire life.
And then I live in the humidity Bermuda Triangle with enough dew in the morning, it feels like you got a 1/4 inch of rain. So by the time you take 95 degrees and put that much dew on it, it turns white as a sheet of paper in 2 days down here.
Oh, man.
It makes me sick.
We did so good with that hot, dry weather. Now, we didn't sleep very much.
No.
It was a little rough being at the field at 3 o'clock in the morning and making sure that everything was ready to go so that when you could go out and put your hands to that. That's the tough part about hay. To do alfalfa right, you have to have a feel for it.
Oh,
there is no tool. There's tools out there that humidity sensors and temperature sensors and dew point and this and that that'll tell you what the numbers are, but until you touch that hay, you don't know.
Absolutely. And I probably use 4 different things every time I go out. And then I hope and pray and watch the yield monitor and hope that Greg's machine is correct.
Oh, I love that stroke counter. Well, now I do want to be a little sensitive to that stroke counter by Ag Excellence. You can find them on hay-kings.com.
And they're great, by the way.
Oh, I mean, they are. The thing about a moisture sensor, people call me and ask, hey, tell me about the moisture sensor on that Ag Excellence stroke counter that Hay King sells.
Yep.
And I say, don't trust any of them. Use them, but don't trust them. You got to touch the hay.
Absolutely, you do.
There is no replacement for human hands in that baling decision. Now, of course, if your hay's been down a week and it's been 100 degrees and 10% humidity, you're probably all right to just go bale, right?
If you've got the stem moisture cured out of it once, then you're probably golden. But if you're on the front edge of that and you haven't got it completely cured out, but it feels really dry,
there is no machine that can tell the difference between stem moisture and dew moisture.
Nope.
I think some of those microwave ones give you a little better hint as to if you have. I've just not used them, but most folks aren't going to go put a $7,000 to $10,000 setup on their balers to check moisture. There are those that do, but if you're not, any of these moisture sensors, I want them to be directionally correct. If the humidity is coming in and the moisture is going up in the bale, I want my moisture sensor to tell me that.
Yep.
If you're getting to 10 o'clock in the morning and the dew's burning off and your moisture is dropping, I want my moisture sensor to tell me that. And then I can get out and look at the bale and check with my hands and figure out whether it's right or not.
Yep. And you always get those other questions too. How many times have you been asked, well, if it's in your hands, John, how do you tell if it's dry or not?
There's old school things that you can do. Take a wad, do the twist test. The twist test is pretty legit for that stem moisture. If it doesn't break in a couple of rotations, and I'm talking about alfalfa particularly because grass is different.
Yep.
In this case, alfalfa, taking a bundle of stems, maybe an inch in diameter, inch and a half in diameter, a handful. Just call it a handful.
Call it a handful.
Doing that twist test, and if it doesn't break in 3 or 4 revolutions, you need to pay attention, right?
I'm one of those. The first thing I do is grab a couple stems and take my thumb and scrape the.
That's where I was going next.
Scrape the bark a little bit. If it still peels off, she's too wet.
Yes, that's a good one. Yours. No, I do that too. You take your thumbnail right along that stem, and if you can scrape anything off, it's probably on the wet side still.
Absolutely.
That calibrated touch to feel that how that leaf is holding onto that stem, and I don't know any other way to describe it.
And I get a little bit squeamish on the side of caution. I have an applicator on my baler, and if I even question anything at all, to me, it's I don't want to bale anything that's way, way wet that I'm going to lose sleep over. But yet there's that borderline time where, John, I pull in the field and I turn it on and I just let it run.
Oh, yep.
I don't even, for what it costs me per ton to put some preservative on.
Cheap.
And knowing that I'm not going to have moldy hay that's going to get returned, complained, I have the opportunity. So I don't put up huge quantities at a time. So there's going to be people listen to this and go, God, what a doorknob. But
right.
I have the ability that I can kind of leave mine not tucked away for a few days and give it a little extra time to breathe and cure, and give it a week if I can. And I like to deliver straight off the farm or leave it sit loose just a little bit more than most people like to for a week or two. And then I stack it away and I feel really good.
So I do have a Silo King applicator on both my big baler and small baler.
Uh-huh.
I have a Delmhurst hand probe, and I do not have the digital version of the Delmhurst. I have the analog with the needle that bounces.
Sure.
I like to see how that needle bounces, especially you put the probe in, hold the button, and then pull out. If you see that needle bouncing a lot, you probably have some stem moisture in there that's going to kick you. But if it's just stable all the way out, you're probably getting a good reading. And this is my experience, and Delmhurst isn't paying me anything one way or the other. Of course, I'm sure all their products work great, but I sure like the way that needle bounces to give me just a touch more information.
Yep, absolutely. That's really cool.
And then we'll do things like watching the pressure on the baler, even on the small balers. If you have a hydraulic tensioner on your baler, That'll give you a little bit of information. Of course, if you start
Yep.
popping shear bolts, that's really telling you something. That's time to stop.
Oh, I tell you what, guilty. First cutting this year, I was going through shear bolts like they were a candy in a box. And then I was like, well, yeah, that's a pretty good indication you're making a mess right here. And it was really tall, long stem, coarse. So I was blaming it on a couple of other things, and it was probably all about moisture. I wasn't wanting that to be the problem, so I was making every excuse I could.
Yep.
Why I should still be baling, and I should have just quit. But yep, after it got dry, I didn't break another one. Which, imagine how that works.
Let's take a break there, and we'll get a word from our sponsor. April showers bring May flowers, but sunny days in May bring tons of June hay. There's no better way to harvest that hay than with a new Krone. For a limited time, you can finance a new Krone mower, tedder, rake, or round baler with 1.9% interest, and the Big M, Big Pack, and Big Collects are available at 3.25% interest for up to 60 months. Low Krone finance rates and July 31st. Hurry in to your local Krone dealer for details today. So that Silo King on our first cutting, it was dry. It was the hay got too dry, which is a little unusual for us. We're usually baling in the afternoons, making first cutting, and then second cutting we're doing the middle of the night, early morning kind of stuff. But in this case, we had to wait for the dew to come back on in the evening.
Yep.
And we went out there and put preservative on the big bales and didn't put preservative on the little bales. 15-16% moisture, and I'm talking 3x4s, and 1,250 pound 3x4s. They actually weighed 1,253 pounds. Just absolute perfect baling conditions. We did end up with a couple of corner bales. That's why I cut all my fields a couple of rounds around the outside and then back and forth to reduce the number of corners, because corners are where you have raking problems.
Oh my God, those corners are horrible.
We did end up with some 21% moisture on big bales. And with that Silo King, we didn't have any heating. We took the bales up to the neighbor, and there was only 2 bales out of a couple hundred that we did. They just didn't look right. So we pulled them out of the stack and took them, we stuck the moisture probe in them. And I absolutely loved that there was no heating. And at 21% moisture on a big bale, there was just the tiniest little bit of dust. And I mean like the way East Coast hay farmers talk about dust.
Yeah. Did it change the color at all? Did it start to get any hint of brown, tan?
Nope.
Stay green.
No tobacco. It stayed green.
Perfect.
It made me a little nervous. I actually just top tarped those stacks and left them outside, a little air gap where I could between the rows and the stack. I didn't push it, which was probably a good deal, but no heating, just a touch of dust. And the guy says, he was helping me haul hay. And he says, I'll take those in exchange for hauling hay and I'll feed them to my cows. They'll be fine. I don't know that I can farm without preservative now.
And forward to that, it's just, I don't want to use it as a crutch. I want to use it as insurance.
Yes. I want to try to get it absolutely perfect. And
still don't do bad behavior and use that to try to cover it up. That's the problem. You get too careless with it and you're still going to have an issue.
Oh, I'm here to tell you that 21% in the big bale would have been a huge problem.
Correct.
Huge problem without that preservative.
I know that I've seen my moisture sensor show 35% on a couple of those behind some trees, or like you said, you hit a corner and that old monitor goes whoop, and I'm like, oh Lord, where's that thing going to show up? And
yep.
I haven't had any reports or any barn fires yet. But anyway, to your point, it might have been a 28%, but it spiked past it. Who knows what went across that sensor at that point?
Right.
Outside edge of the bale too. So.
Yep.
Oh, great to have tools.
The Ag Excellence is great for having other operators. The Silo King is great for marginal condition, or where you have it right. You just want to make sure.
You do. Absolutely.
There's no use in putting up 180 RFV hay that molds or turns tobacco on you.
Absolutely not. You know, something that I learned this year.
I just used the RFV number. I'm going to slap myself on the back of the hand and say it was 188 RFQ to talk
There you
about
go.
forage
Thank
digestibility. 28 NDF, or sorry, 28 ADF. That was good feed.
So interestingly enough, since you keyed on that again, I had a gentleman call me the other day asking about what he could do to make his alfalfa better. And he was a little down in the mouth because it was testing at 148 RFV. And we talked about a lot of stuff. And then all of a sudden I said, hey, wait a minute. You have not mentioned the word RFQ yet. What does that number look like in your hay sample? So, John, it was 144 RFV, 186
Jeez.
RFQ. So I said, young man, do you realize what you have there? What you have is a hay bale that has lots of fiber in it.
But it's very digestible fiber.
It's very digestible fiber. So that's where your lowered number came from, having so much fiber, because the crude protein still was like at 21.6%. So almost 22% protein.
Yeah.
But the NDF number, the nutra-detergent fiber, was very high.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, with the Harvextra trait, it was very, very digestible fiber. Anyway, so once we got done with that conversation, he was like, oh, I'm like, yes, that's why you bought Harvextra alfalfa. You can have a high fiber number that's very effective and it's very digestible. So I imagine the people that are buying that from you right now are telling you they'll take everything you got. Standing orders. Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
But it was fun to be able to talk through some of the numbers just a little bit for people to understand that although RFV is still this industry, I'm going to call it an industry standard, whether I need to say it or not, but it's still a widely used number.
Yes.
But RFQ gives you the predictor of animal performance and a better value of what that's really, really worth. So anyway, fun example how some of that stuff works. So it's kind of a nice moment to be able to spend the time and finally come to an aha moment when we were so focused on something else.
Well, if you want to go back and learn a little bit more, you can check out the episode I did with Dr. Dan Putnam, where we talked about fiber digestibility. And I had so many aha moments.
I have to tell you that the young man that I was talking about said, oh, yeah, that sounds a lot like the discussion I heard on Hay Kings when I listened to that one podcast.
Yeah.
Yay.
So
that was kind of cool.
Well, this is where people need to hear stuff several times to realize that the value of forage is actually, I mean, there's protein value, but soybean meal, canola meal, cottonseed meal, there's 1,000 other ways to get protein that's cheaper.
Yes.
Period. End of story. So we're not competitive on protein. There's all sorts of different ways to get sugars. Carbohydrates from corn is like the most obvious, but neither corn nor, well, cottonseed meal has pretty good fiber, but
correct,
nor soybean meal is going to have the right fiber that cows need. So as we're selling hay, we need to be emphasizing that fiber and fiber digestibility component.
I think it's amazing how many discussions we've had over the years where we talk about how important fiber is. And then people get kind of crazy and they start going off the tracks and they say, you know what, less alfalfa, more grass, less alfalfa, more grass. Because I can manage that grass really well. I can get decent protein. And then they start feeding it for a long time. And it's amazing how many people that went to the right side of the track and now they're coming back to the left going, you know, that changes how that cow performs more than I thought. The effective fiber that alfalfa provides me, plus that crude protein, is a magical combination that I underestimated. And I think I see some of the people that fed a lot of it for that purpose are maybe putting a little more alfalfa back in because they are seeing a change.
Yep.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. Maybe it's just the people I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness that they are. That helps me a little.
Yep.
But it's, again, the cows will tell you what's good for them. The computer thinks it knows, but the cows will tell you.
The proof is in the production, right?
Absolutely. And it's so amazing when you talk to different producers and they go, you know, we made this tweak or we got into this new pile or we did this different or that different. And the cows told us that wasn't right or that was the perfect thing to do. And they really love it. So we're going to try to stay over here if we can. It's pretty neat.
Oh, one thing I want to put a point on with my second year alfalfa, going back to what can I do to make my alfalfa better? Cut it a little earlier. We don't have control over the weather windows, but if you have the option, take it a little earlier, maybe get another cutting. There's economic reasons to do those sorts of things. Tighten up your cutting interval where you can. That is something that we can do better.
You know, you and I could sit here and talk about that for another 45 minutes, but yes, if you're struggling with quality,
cut it earlier.
Check your program. If that's not the issue, and so John, I think people, depending on which fall dormancy variety they ended up planting, they could be used to one cutting regime and they switched varieties, didn't really know that they got something different and they're letting it stand there too long and maybe it matured too fast. And then yes, they need to cut it a little bit quicker because they went from a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 5 and they didn't really realize that their management needed to change with the type of variety that they have planted. So all of a sudden they're a little bit going, God, it feels like I'm a week off here. That quality wasn't what it should have been. Well, technically you were.
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
What's up, Hey Kings? You have a lot of choices when it comes to sourcing your equipment parts, but have you tried Messick's? We have $20 million in equipment parts on our shelves, and we pick up from C&H Parts Depots daily. All this inventory is available with same-day shipping with no upcharges or expediting fees. Messick's.com has exclusive features like transparent pricing, photos of parts, fit verification, alternative part options, and an obsolete part search tool alongside the manufacturer's drawings so you're not guessing at what you need. We cover all the top brands, including New Holland, Case IH, Kubota, Krone, and Peckway, and more, all from our website. Our online tools are backed by 60-plus parts professionals who are just a call away, ready to find even the most obscure parts. So whether you're a seasoned farmer or a weekend enthusiast, think Messick's for a convenient and professional part shopping experience. Visit us at Messick's.com or call our parts hotline at 877-260-3528.
Messick's, a helping hand with your lands.
A question. Now, this is just us talking about my operation here. Last year, I planted a non-cropland variety. Sorry, we just didn't have it all put together, but it was Roundup ready, and a 3.2 winter hardiness. 3.2 fall dormancy.
Fall dormancy for your area,
and then the lowest the best winter hardiness I could come up with.
Right,
and then
probably
we did
1.2 somewhere, 1.4,
and then we did Tundra 2. From cropland for me this year.
Yep.
And the next 100 acres that I'm going to work, I'm thinking I need something that I can harvest just a little earlier. So I should be thinking about, just for my operational plan, the next stuff that I'm going to plant, I need to be a little bit earlier because I'm actually adding alfalfa acres. Net new alfalfa acres, and I need to expand my harvest window. So I should be thinking about a 4.
Yeah.
Do I just add one number? Do I add a half? Because they do them in tenths, right? I'm
going to suggest going from a 3, which was your probably a 3.4 or something like that was your Tundra 2.
Yep.
To like a 4.6 or 4.7 on the other side, which would be Megatron AA.
Doggies.
Extra.
Okay, well, I'm listening, but a 4.2 scares the bejesus out of me.
I don't believe you want to go much higher or bump it into a 5 because you just simply don't have the growing season to support it. And to your point, if you want to move so you can start cutting a week to 5 days sooner to start on your higher dormancy varieties once they're all established and then move into your Tundra.
Yep.
As the second wave of alfalfa cutting, so you're not doing it all the same week or having something too mature. Yes.
Yep. Or
the
other component is it might just rain on us for 3 weeks, from Memorial Day on, and then everything's going to be over and mature. But if I do get a window, I can go earlier.
The beautiful thing about you making that comment about weather and flexibility and how if you have to be in the field for an extra 5 to 7 days, the fact that you are utilizing the Harvextra technology and the reduced lignin, you could be shooting for 200 RFQ hay and have to leave that out there a week longer. The fact that it produces lignin slower is how I'm going to phrase it, and you don't have so much lignin accumulation over that period of time, the Harvexter will help you with that flexibility tremendously as well. So you
That
don't
should make
lose
me
the quality as fast versus a regular conventional version.
So that makes me a little braver on the quality component of
Absolutely.
earlier maturing alfalfa. I'm still not super brave because we got done with first cutting. Hold on to your hat. We started first cutting 5th of June, which is traditionally early for us, but we've been getting earlier and earlier heat units.
Sure.
So we started the 5th of June. Maybe normal would be the 10th to 15th. So we were by a week early. Just call it a week early. We got that first cutting off, and then we got a frost.
My Lord.
There aren't very many places in the country where you hear people talking about a frost on a second cutting. 15th of June.
Well, I guess the good thing is it was cut and you had harvest done and then it froze afterwards. You get the frost afterwards.
15th of June, we had a light frost, and it burnt.
Yeah.
Well, we had several freeze events this year.
Sure.
I told you that my new seeding was 2 days from coming up. The cotyledons were just about to push out of the ground, and we hit 26 degrees. That takes the mickey out of first cutting. I'm telling you, 26 degrees on growing foot tall alfalfa. It bent every alfalfa field over in I don't know, every field that I saw was bent over.
I was going to say when it bent them over, but how many of those primary growth points actually died where it had to start from a different spot, or did it just kind of wilt them over versus?
I want to say that we had a few more stems because of it, but the plant didn't start all over from scratch. Like I've seen it where it killed the top growth and the plant started from the bottom again. 22 degrees for like 4 hours.
Yeah, that'll do it.
That makes an alfalfa plant start over again.
Especially on a thin stand.
Yep.
Where that temperature in the canopy can get colder
is allowed to penetrate. Yep. So we have some unique challenges, and pushing that fall dormancy rating higher makes me a little nervous for our frost potential. But we could really knock it out of the park too, because there's years where the 10th of May it warms up and stays warm.
So we had this debate, and it comes up frequently where people are like, well, if I push the fall dormancy, it's going to break dormancy faster, get bigger faster, and it's going to have a bigger chance that I'm going to have a frost event hit it. Mm-hmm. Yep. Fact of the matter is you're already ahead. We know it's a fast growing plant. The canopy generally will insulate most of that so it doesn't get much damage other than just those longer, taller stems that are outside the canopy on top.
Yep.
And if it's a faster growing variety, the recovery time for that to catch up and get going again should be just a little bit quicker. So did you really lose much? Maybe a few days worth of time. Depends on the severity of the frost. Again, 22 degrees for 4 hours would cause a lot more damage than 26 degrees.
Yep.
And a 30-degree freeze, you go, windshield was white, but who cares?
Yeah, no big deal. You don't worry about light frost.
Yeah, I understand your fall dormancy concern. Well, the other thing is if it doesn't work well, you'll only do it once, and that heartache will last for just a short while.
Well, I think I know. I might also put it under some irrigation too. I have one irrigated field that would work really nice. That's just a big rocky sand pile that's meant for alfalfa. That would work fine.
So that's the only concern is a late frost event, because from a winter hardiness standpoint, the fall dormancy 4s and 5s that we're kicking out of the industry today have the same as good or better winter hardiness rating than the 3s and the 2s do from what I've seen so far. And literally, I can remember 10 years ago, I took a fall dormancy 5 all the way, kind of like your situation. You could see Canada from where we planted that stuff. And fall dormancy 5, winter hardiness 1.2, guys loved it. Did they gain a whole lot of extra? And I'll tell you why we did that. It was all about, I had this strategy on moisture management and stress mitigation. So I'm like, okay, guys, follow me here. If you can get a fall dormancy 5 that breaks dormancy really quick in the spring, that's usually when we had the best moisture.
Yes.
April through June, July
Yes.
1st. So if we can hammer that thing out of the ground, get it really going, it might freeze. That's a risk I'm willing to take. You take your first cutting on May 28th or June 1st,
Yep.
June 5th instead of June 10th.
Yep.
You're just sliding everything forward so you can manage that soil moisture and get a second cut before it completely just is gone. So I actually had a few people in the Dakotas, South Dakota, North Dakota, that planted fall dormancy 5s for a period of time to try to use it as a stress mitigation or drought management tool to get 2 cuttings faster before we just literally dried up. Now, unfortunately, I have not kept up with those particular growers that did that, but they also haven't been calling me names that I know of. So it might have worked. It might not have worked. I'm not sure. In my mind, on paper, it was a perfect idea.
Well, you're kind of selling me on it. That's all there is to it. We're
Well, how
gonna,
about a 6, John? Oh, wait a minute. Those are semi-dormant. That's not going to work.
Nope, I'm out on a 6. We're not talking 6s here. I like the work that I do with my Australian friends, because when they complain that it's freezing and that they're freezing and that it's cold, I remind them that we hit minus 26 this year. And we also hit 106 this year. So I live in a fairly extreme environment. And then you pray that you have snow cover at minus 26, because if you don't, it's bad. That's a train wreck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uncovered anything at minus 26 with a little wind doesn't survive.
That was going to be my next comment. Uncovered, negative 26, dry soil and wind to dehydrate it even more. Just a kick in the pants right there.
Well,
Do
we
it every
actually,
time.
one of the fields, so this is ground that I picked up in 22, and one of the fields had a beautiful alfalfa stand. We probably took 3.5 tons in 2 cuttings, and then had it in a stack of big bales, and I was there the day that we were loading out, and it was 0 and blowing 20, uncovered on dry soil. And you could see the shadows, because the wind was coming from the north. That's how we get those kind of cold temperatures. The wind was coming from the north, and there were shadows from the northern tree line south, where the trees protected the alfalfa and where the snow blew over the little hill that's in the center of the field and created what's the word I'm looking? Drift. Created a drift. So there's a strip of alfalfa on the south side of this hill where the snow protected it.
Absolutely.
So that's also left me with a philosophy on cutting alfalfa just a little bit taller, especially those later cuttings, to leave a little bit more insulation, catch a little snow, insulation for us.
Yep. I've actually even seen too where you get the south side of a fence line in the Dakotas where you drift for 10 or 12, 15 feet out.
Yep.
You get this really interesting warm February where things are melting really nice, and you get those snows melting, and then it freezes again and goes back down to 10 degrees.
Yep.
Everything that had snow melt on it where it ponded or that snowdrift was not sitting, literally winter killed it. And you could see, you could literally, even like you said, you could see the shadow effect from the telephone poles, even just being that small.
Yep.
26 inches in diameter, caused a little bit of a snowdrift.
Yep.
And you could see that little finger come out where it was protected and beautiful. Just craziest stuff.
Yep. I mean, we're talking at the edges of what makes a difference. And it's the smallest little things sometimes. Cutting an inch taller, I also let the new seeding that I did this year go clear to flower before we took that 1/2 ton to the acre clipping.
Again, every day that plant stands out there, it has the ability to store more carbohydrates in that root system to have healthy regrowth for the next cut.
I would not.
Oh, by the way,
in my no rain environment, I would not cut new seeding before flower ever.
That's another one of those little tickle advantages we talk about that Harvextra technology is if you leave that plant stand in the field an extra 5 days versus a regular variety that doesn't have the trait, over 5 days, you should gain about 500 pounds of dry matter material.
If it had
You
rained,
also
yes.
accumulate more carbohydrates and sugars in that root system.
Yep.
And when you cut it 5 days later, your quality would be about what the other crop was cut 5 days sooner. So you add those extra little benefits, and the further south you go outside of your area where they get 4, 5, 6 cuttings, pretty soon you take 5 cuttings and stretch it out 5 days each time. You can almost take one cutting clear out where you've raised equal quality, less harvest costs, and more tons per cut. And the regrowth is tremendous. The data would suggest that cutting 4 times in that same environment, they yielded more than cutting 5 times because that plant didn't have to start over. And it just kept growing and adding tonnage. So then you start saying, oh, I reduced harvest cost, I reduced wheel traffic, I reduced compaction, injury on that plant. You could almost assume, we don't want to make statements, obviously, but you could almost assume that it might last longer. The less stress it has. Anyway.
Well,
kind of a fun piece.
and we can think about the life of a stand in number of cuttings.
Yes, we've discussed this one before, too.
We have. Something I wanted to talk about. Jeremy Clarkson has done more for agriculture with his little TV show. Have you watched Clarkson's Farm? You need to go watch Clarkson's Farm.
Sorry, Clarkson, I have not watched your farm yet.
So it's Jeremy Clarkson, the guy from Top Gear, the car guy. He went out and bought a farm in his retirement, and it's absolutely beautiful to watch. That's cool. A perfectly real representation of what agriculture is. Fences breaking, sheep getting out, government regulation. It's real. It's just planting crops wrong, screwing stuff up. But he teaches about what they call tram lines, and we might say controlled traffic in fields. I've gone to controlled traffic, and I absolutely freaking love it. Absolutely. It's a big deal. I mean, I'm glad that he's doing that because in the alfalfa world, we've literally been talking about that for years, that wheel traffic and compaction, especially just wheel traffic. I mean, we talked about Undersander and Dan Putnam before have done some amazing work about studying that. And they will tell you that I'm probably not getting the numbers even close. So we're not going to cite any articles, but 30 to 40% of the surface area of your field gets traveled over, and those little chutes have to all start over. Oh, and you can really see it when you have to leave first cutting in the field for a long time, and you get that wavy second cutting. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, when I say that I've gone to controlled traffic, I'm just talking about my gopher control, my harrowing to knock down the gopher mounds. We have gopher problems, if you can't tell. Fertilizer and herbicide applications are all done in the same tracks. Yes. And on 36-foot centers. That just happens to be the set of equipment that I have I was like, oh, hey, I can do this. Let's do it. This works out great. There's no reason not to. It actually makes it a little easier. So only 1 or 2 of the implements have to have GPS on it. And you can run other tractors, and it's just there's some ancillary benefits there. The gopher machine, we probably are gonna have to do more than 36-foot centers, but it made such a difference in that first cutting. There's no variability in the wheel tracks. And I screwed it up on one field because I forgot to change my GPS setting. Oh, sure. And did 40-foot centers and 36-foot centers and just made a mess out of one 40-acre field. And the other field the other 45-acre field across the road, I did perfectly. And you could tell the difference. You could see the skips. You could see, yes. I go in on my field with the same tractor, same wheelbase. I basically run the same track, and I have to be the first guy to admit, when you're talking about having a guy that does a TV show to tell you what not to do, I need to be a part of his episodes, because literally I've had a couple of times, John, where it rained the night before. The next morning I went out and cut hay. Eek. Wet
wet soil compaction, but I put it in a narrow windrow, get everything in between dry the next day,
Flip
ted it back
over,
out.
yeah.
So again, I'm cutting on a set of tracks, I'm tedding on a set of tracks, I'm merging with the set of tracks, and probably end up baling on the same set of tracks by the way the hay gets moved. And I have a couple sets of wheel tracks in the lower portion of my field that are about as dead as the floor behind me right now, because I was out there at the wrong time multiple times, but it's one set of wheel tracks instead of
15. Oh yeah. Because by the time you're go for poisoning, harrowing, fertilizing, spraying again, swathing, raking, baling, hauling. I mean, just to get one cutting off, you're over that field 10 times.
It seems like, for sure. So anyway.
Okay, well, there's
the stuff we do, the things we learn.
Two guys just sitting here talking about the finer points of hay farming.
These are the fun conversations because you get to share a few things, and you also pick up stuff. There's always those little things that you pick up that you're like, yeah. Doesn't matter how many years you do it.
For the guys in the Midwest that have been really dry, if you're worried about herbicide residuals, look at the labels for the Western states. We're always freaking dry.
Yeah, right. Yeah, use the Western labels.
Use the Western labels. If you're in a drought condition somewhere in the Midwest or East Coast somewhere, and you've been really, really dry and worried about herbicide, use our West Coast labels. We are dry.
Yes.
6-inch annual rainfall zones. I'm in 20 inches. I was just talking to one of my Hay Kings guys. They had 5 inches of rain in the Shenandoah Valley the other day. And I don't think we've had 5 inches of rain since February.
Even those guys, though, too, John, where you have some flooding, they'll go, well, should I have to worry about that? I just had 6 million gallons of water go across that field. It should be fine. Guys, we still have to follow the restrictions, whether you think it's there or not.
Labels the law.
Labels the law. Follow it. And don't ask for forgiveness on my watch. Thank you very much.
This has been a good conversation. We'll just kind of publish this, let somebody else benefit from our screw-ups and our ideas and the places we've got lucky and the things that we're talking about for next year, because planning for next year should have started last year.
So if people need to find more content, they can follow you on heykings.com, and they can find me on The Forage Fanatic at almost any social media outlet that's available. So thank you, folks, and have a great day.
Perfect. Except hey-kings.com. If you Google Hay Kings, I come up first.